Look at me when I'm talking to you, Bach. I was on my knees on Atlanta asphalt when I heard that line, heat coming up through my slacks like a stove turned on high, and the man saying it was a cop I had trained with my own hands. In that moment, with his fingers digging into my jaw and his boot pressing into my shoulder, I realized my worst student had just become my biggest nightmare. The asphalt on Memorial Drive was so hot it felt like it was peeling the skin off my knees. My hands were cuffed behind my back, my blazer was sticking to my shoulders, and cars were just rolling by, like this was normal background noise in America. He tilted my chin up toward the sun. My eyes watered from the light, and I heard a woman across the street whisper, "Oh my God," as she lifted her phone and started recording. "Thought you were somebody important, huh?" he said softly, that ugly little smirk on his face. "Look at you now. Pathetic." He spat right next to my knee. The spit actually sizzled a little on the pavement, and for a second my brain just disconnected, like this couldn't actually be my life. Then as I focused on his face, on the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, on the little scar near his hairline from the academy obstacle course, something clicked. "Danny," I whispered, my voice shaking more from disbelief than fear, "is that you?" He leaned in so close I could feel his breath against my ear. "Now you remember me." "Instructor Owens," he murmured. "Bet you're real proud of your training right about now." That was the moment the world flipped upside down for me. But to really understand how we got there, I have to take you back about 6 hours. That morning started with sunlight on a graduation cap sitting on my kitchen counter. My daughter Emma had left it there before heading to campus, like she wanted my blessing on it, like all the late nights and missed birthdays and budget fights at City Hall were somehow stitched into that cap. 1 week from that morning, she would walk across the stage at Spelman as valedictorian. Then in a few months, she'd be moving to Boston on a full ride to Harvard Law. 23 years earlier, I was a tired beat cop drinking gas station coffee out of a paper cup trying to figure out how to pay rent. And now I was stirring honey into my mug from Howard University, staring at my baby's graduation program stuck to the fridge with a magnet. Above the coffee maker hung 3 framed awards I never thought I'd own: the President's Award for Community Police Reform, the National Medal for Police Training Excellence, the Department of Justice Community Partnership Recognition. In every photo, I'm standing next to some mayor or police chief or senator, smiling like I wasn't carrying the weight of every officer I'd ever trained on my shoulders. People in the departments I consulted for called me the cop whisperer behind my back. What I actually did was pretty simple and pretty hard. At the same time, I took young recruits who thought the badge made them warriors and tried to convince them the badge made them guardians instead. I spent 15 years running training at the Atlanta Police Academy, then moved into running my own nonprofit, the Atlanta Community Safety Institute. On paper, my numbers were almost boring. They were so clean: 96% graduation rate over 15 years, 0. Officer-involved shootings from my graduates in their first 3 years. 0 excessive force complaints in year 1. Departments across the Southeast used those numbers in their federal grant applications. City councils waved those charts around like a shield, and everyone told me my work made me untouchable. You know what happens right after people start calling you untouchable? Life shows you exactly how touchable you are. That morning, I had CNN murmuring in the background, a stack of files from Birmingham, Jacksonville, Charlotte, Memphis spread across my granite countertop, all of them asking for my magic formula to fix their departments. I had a slideshow open on my laptop for a presentation to the City Council Public Safety Committee pages of before and after stats testimonials from officers and community leaders, neat colored graphs showing lower complaints and higher trust. The pitch was for $2.8 million in federal community policing grants money. I honestly believed could change how Atlanta trained officers for a generation. I was in the middle of adjusting a bar chart when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then something in my gut told me to pick up. "Ms. Owens, this is Sarah Wilson from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution," a woman's voice said. "I need to speak with you urgently about an incident involving one of your former students." My fingers just let go of the coffee mug. It hit the counter, hot liquid spread across my printed slides, brown, soaking into white paper like blood on concrete steam, curling up as my beautiful charts turned to mush. Sarah refused to give details over the phone, said there was a video, said it was going to break big. Every officer I trained carried a piece of my integrity out there into the world, and suddenly I felt like someone was holding that piece over an open flame. I grabbed my keys, told myself I'd clean the mess later, and headed for Emma's campus, because when I don't know what's coming, I want my child within arm's reach. It was a clear afternoon traffic light, my mind spinning between what did he do and how bad can it be, and maybe it's just a misunderstanding that little voice we use to bargain with reality. I was going 35 and a 40 when red and blue lights flared in my rearview mirror. It barely even registered at first. That's how deep I was in my head. Then the siren chirped, and training took over. Signal mirror moved to the right, come to a full stop in the empty lot of a shuttered grocery store. Car and park hands at 10 and 2, registration and insurance in the glove box, phone on the dash. I've taught entire 8-hour blocks on how citizens should survive traffic stops. Funny how my brain ran the checklist like muscle memory. He walked up to the driver's window with the kind of stride that says, "I'm looking for a problem." No smile, no "Good afternoon, ma'am," not even a basic introduction, just license and registration, flat and hard. I kept my hands visible. "Of course, officer," I said calmly. "May I ask why I'm being stopped?" His jaw flexed. "Did I ask you a question?" That was the first flicker of real fear. Not because I hadn't seen that attitude before, but because I felt how quickly the ground could shift. I handed over my license and paperwork. He stepped slightly back, tilted them so the sun hit the laminate just right, and then I watched it happen. His eyes froze on my name, and something ugly slid across his face. Recognition, then resentment, then a flash of almost childish satisfaction like, "Oh, this is going to be fun." "Step out of the vehicle," he said. "I don't understand why, officer. I'd like to know the reason for the stop," I replied, still as calm as I could manage. "Out. Now." His hand rested on his weapon, and every fiber in my being screamed that this was no longer about a traffic violation. I stepped out. My heels clicked on the hot asphalt, my heart pounding in my ears. "Turn around, hands behind your back." "Am I under arrest?" "What are the charges you're resisting?" he said, like he was ordering a sandwich. Steel closed around my wrists, way tighter than protocol, the bite of metal making my eyes water. He yanked my arms up until pain shot through my shoulders. "On your knees." "This is unnecessary force, officer. I have complied with every command I said, because part of me was already building the record, already thinking like a trainer, like an expert witness. I said, get on your fucking knees." My legs buckled. The asphalt burned through my slacks immediately, a raw, bright heat that made it hard to think. His shadow swallowed my face as he stepped in front of me, and then came that line. "Look at me when I'm talking to you, Buck. Eyes up." His hand clamped around my jaw, forcing my face upward, and our eyes finally met. For just a second, the professional mask slipped. I saw a younger face superimposed over the one in front of me, eager, respectful, hungry to learn. And then it shattered. "Danny," I whispered. "Danny Matthews, the recruit." I had trained 3 years earlier. The one who sat in the front row taking notes on constitutional law, the one who stayed after class to ask about community engagement. "Well, well, well," he said, his voice low and dripping with contempt, "if it isn't the famous Teresa Owens, the cop whisperer herself." Across the street, a woman in a sundress stopped, pulled out her phone, and started recording. Danny saw her, glanced at the little red light on his dash cam, and it didn't slow him down one bit. "Thought you were somebody important, huh? Look at you now. Pathetic." He spat on the pavement beside my knees, the spit literally steaming on the hot concrete, then pressed his boot against my shoulder to keep me off balance. "Remember me now, Instructor Owens?" he murmured, leaning down until his mouth was almost against my ear. "Bet you tell everybody about your perfect graduation rates." My voice came out as barely a breath. "What happened to you, Danny?" He laughed, sharp and bright like breaking glass. "You happened to me. You and your community policing your respect and dignity training. The real world doesn't work like your classroom, lady. This city doesn't need guardians. It needs enforcers." The phone across the street trembled in that woman's hand. The dash cam blinked, and I stayed on my knees, every nerve screaming, thinking, this is going to ruin more than just my day. The video went up at 3:47 p.m. By 4:15, it was racing across Twitter. The caption was simple: "Atlanta cop forces black woman to kneel, then spits on the ground next to her." Within an hour, I was a trending topic. People argued about the angle, the tone of my voice, whether or not my hands had moved, whether I must have done something to deserve that treatment. Civil rights accounts shared it, influencers reacted to it. Local activists started tagging city officials. My phone lit up with calls and texts I didn't have the bandwidth to answer. While all that was happening online, my daughter was in the Spellman dining hall laughing with friends over dinner. Someone at another table said, "Yo, is this downtown?" and held up a phone. She recognized my voice before my face heard me say, "This is unnecessary force," and watched an officer force her mother's face upward. Watched him spit. Watched him laugh. Her fork clattered onto the plate. The entire dining hall went quiet and she barely made it to the bathroom before her stomach gave up. She locked herself in a stall, hands shaking, and called me. I didn't answer. Atlanta PD's phones crashed under the weight of incoming calls. Protesters started gathering outside headquarters with signs that read, "Fire Danny Matthews and Teresa Owens deserves justice." The mayor issued a short statement about being aware of the video and promising a thorough review which satisfied exactly nobody. At 9:45 p.m., I finally pulled into my driveway, media vans lining the street, neighbors peeking from behind curtains, cameras flashing as I walked from my car to my townhouse, silent head down. Inside, Emma was waiting, white-knuckled grip on her phone, eyes red. She collapsed into my arms in the same kitchen that had smelled like coffee and hope just that morning and whispered, "How did this happen?" I didn't have an answer. What the internet didn't know yet was the twist that made this whole thing explode. I wasn't just any victim, and Danny wasn't just any cop. Sarah Wilson figured that out at 6 the next morning when she pulled my old academy files. By lunchtime, she had the proof: my signature on his graduation certificate, my handwritten notes on his evaluations. Shows promise in community engagement, responds well to de-escalation instruction recommended for patrol assignment. She cross-referenced it with the viral video and dropped a headline that hit like gasoline on an open fire. Viral video victim actually trained the officer who humiliated her. Cable news picked it up within hours. Panels debated teacher versus student, reform versus reality. People threw my own training slogans back at me like accusations. Then Sarah dug deeper, and what she found turned one bad cop story into a full-blown institutional scandal. She FOIA'd Danny's personnel file and found 8 complaints in 3 years. Excessive force, racial profiling, harassment of black teenagers, mishandled mental health calls, every one of them stamped insufficient evidence by internal affairs. Same captain, same boilerplate language, same rubber stamp. She FOIA'd federal cops' grant applications and discovered that Atlanta PD had been using my pristine training stats to justify millions in federal community policing money, while hiding Danny's misconduct from federal oversight by dragging out investigations and closing them just after reporting periods. When she laid those documents across my kitchen table, I felt my professional confidence turn to ice water. They had used my name and my numbers to bring in money, then protected the officer who violated everything I stand for, then dumped me on the asphalt the moment it threatened to blow back on them. And when public anger rose high enough to feel dangerous, they launched their counterattack. 48 hours after the video went viral, Atlanta PD quietly promoted Danny Matthews to Senior Patrol Officer Commendation for professionalism under difficult circumstances included. The police union president held a press conference saying he'd been unfairly vilified by social media mobs and that I had been non-compliant and created a dangerous situation. At the same time, the department announced a formal review of my training methods, barred me from academy property, cut off my access to curriculum and students, and my consulting contracts started getting paused with carefully worded emails. An IRS audit notice hit my nonprofit's mailbox. Our accounts were flagged. Payroll froze, my mortgage payment bounced. Anonymous accounts started targeting Emma online. Someone spray-painted "cop lover" on her dorm building. Former colleagues who had once called me legend stopped returning my calls. For about 3 days, I lived in that place where you're too angry to cry and too exhausted to fight. I sat in my garage one night surrounded by boxes of awards and academy photos, staring at a resignation letter on my laptop that started with, "After careful consideration, I am stepping away from all community safety work." Emma found me there, eyes swollen, voice hoarse from crying. I didn't even remember doing. "What if I just walk away?" I asked her. "Disappear. Let them have it. Stop being a symbol of anything." She looked at me like I was the only grown-up left in the world and said, "If you walk away, Mom, then they win twice." Yeah, that hit me. The thing that changed everything came from inside the department, from someone who decided they were done watching the worst people run the show. Sarah sent me an email with a video attachment labeled "Danny Break Room." On the screen, he was in uniform, leaning back in a plastic chair in the precinct break room, surrounded by other officers. You should have seen her face when I made her kneel, he said, laughing. The great Teresa Owens down where she belongs. One of the guys off camera said, "Wasn't she your instructor?" And Danny took a long sip of coffee and said, "Yeah, best thing she did for me was show me what not to do. All that community policing crap, that respect stuff. Out here they only understand force." They joked about internal affairs always having his back about how complaints just disappear if the right captain signs off. It was 3 minutes of pure contempt, not just for me, but for everything I had spent my life teaching. When that video hit the internet, the narrative moved from maybe he had a tough call to this guy as a racist bully protected by the system. Emma took the mic next. She asked Spellman for assembly time, stood in front of 800 students and said, "My mother spent 23 years teaching officers that a badge is a promise, not a weapon. 800 of them listened. One of them threw it away. That one man doesn't get to erase who she is." Someone filmed it and suddenly #Emma Strong was trending next to #Justice for Teresa. My former students started posting their own videos talking about how my training helped them de-escalate situations instead of inflaming them, how they carried my voice in their heads on every call. The story shifted again. From me as a failed reformer whose student went rogue to me as one of the only people in this mess who had actually done their job. That's when the feds called. Special Agent Catherine Carter from the Department of Justice showed up with an FBI analyst and a Treasury investigator and a stack of files thick enough to make my head spin. They laid out federal grant applications from 12 cities across the Southeast, all of them claiming some kind of partnership with my training program, all of them using my statistics to justify tens of millions in community policing money. Some I had actually consulted for, some I had never even visited. On a laptop, they played audio from wiretaps, the training commander at Atlanta PD, laughing about how the Teresa Owens angle is perfect. Feds, eat that reform stuff up, we just paste her numbers everywhere. Another voice asked, what would happen if I started asking questions, and he said, "We've got insurance. One of her kids is messy, we protect him. She steps out of line, we leak his file, make her look incompetent. She goes down, we walk." Then they showed me how the money moved. Shell companies with training or community in the name invoices for services never provided federal dollars, turning into lake houses, boats, rental properties, luxury cars. They had taken my life's work, my name, my reputation, and used it as camouflage for their own greed. "We need your help," Agent Carter said. "This is bigger than one officer, bigger than one department. Your testimony can help us take down an entire network that has been weaponizing your success while protecting its worst actor." I sat there thinking about my knees on that asphalt, my daughter's speech, those 800 officers who listened, and I realized I was being handed one last enormous class to teach. "All right," I said. "You bring the evidence, I'll bring the voice." A few weeks later, I walked into a packed Atlanta City Council chamber for an emergency hearing. Protesters, pastors, students, activists, national media, federal agents, the whole circus. Danny sat in the front row in a suit flanked by union lawyers, all the swagger drained out of him. Behind him sat the training commander, the internal affairs captain, a couple of lieutenants who had signed off on every clearance memo. Giant screens showed slides as Agent Carter presented the findings, wiretapped conversations, money trails, grant applications that listed my name in cities I had never billed, purchase records for lake houses and boats tied directly to stolen federal money. Then they called me. I talked about what I actually taught at that academy, about the difference between power and service, about watching one of my own graduates use the authority I helped give him to grind my face into the pavement. I told them, "You paid for guardians and let them become predators. You took reform dollars and bought waterfront property. You did all of that behind my name." And then right there on live TV, U.S. Marshals stepped forward and arrested the training commander, the internal affairs captain, and another supervisor. A sergeant broke down and confessed into the microphone that they had been ordered to clear every complaint against Danny to keep the stats clean for federal reporting. Community members came up and described how Danny had treated them in traffic stops and on sidewalks and outside convenience stores, and one by one my former students got up and talked about how my classes had kept them from becoming another Danny. By the time the council president read the resolution, stripping the entire training chain of command, inviting federal oversight, asking me to help rebuild the academy from scratch, you could feel the air shift. For the first time since my knees hit that asphalt, I felt like maybe, just maybe, the system was looking in the mirror. 6 months later, the ripple effects reached far beyond Memorial Drive. Danny was facing federal civil rights charges and multiple civil suits. His promotion was rescinded, his badge taken, his pension gone, his name tagged in every conversation about police abuse and accountability. The training commander and his inner circle were trading their summer houses for federal prison numbers. 12 cities lost cops grant funding and were under investigation. Congressional hearings dragged those perfect charts back out and asked how many other departments had built their success stories on buried complaints and fake training numbers. Atlanta created an independent civilian board to oversee academy curricula with community members sitting at the same table as trainers and officers. My institute, which had been on the verge of collapse, received emergency federal funding to rebuild properly this time with real oversight built into the structure. The Department of Justice asked me to sit on a national commission for police training standards. Emma gave her valedictorian speech at Spelman about courage, accountability, and how justice sometimes starts with a phone in the hands of a stranger across the street. She's in Cambridge now, starting Harvard law, planning to spend her career making sure what happened to me becomes evidence, not a pattern. As for me, I still wake up some nights feeling that asphalt under my knees. I still question every evaluation I ever wrote, every recruit I ever passed. I also sit in training rooms now, look at young officers in the eye and show them a blurred still from a video of a woman kneeling on hot concrete. I don't tell them right away that the woman is me. I just ask, when you put on your badge and walk onto your streets, are you going to be the person holding the power or the person protecting the people from it? And then I make them sit with that. So let me ask you the same thing. I ask them, when you watch what happened on that road, do you see a problem with one man, or do you see a problem with the whole structure that kept him in power and tried to destroy the person who trained him right in the first place? Do you believe these systems can actually be reformed from within? Or do you think stories like mine are proof that we need to tear them down and rebuild them from the ground up? If this story made you feel something, angry, hopeful, tired, fired up, tell me in the comments what you think is the real solution. Share this with someone who still thinks a few bad apples is the whole story. And if you want to hear more real cases where truth drags power into the light, hit like, hit subscribe, and let's keep talking about what justice should actually look like in the real world.